Hi all, and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be learning about the 3 psychological needs and how they influence your motivation to get the things done that you want to get done. So most people think about motivation in a carrot and stick approach. They want to create incentives for themselves to actually do the things they want to get done, and then they create punishments for themselves if they are not able to do those things. The issue with this approach is that it has been shown to be fairly detrimental to the psychological state and not very sustainable. As you can imagine, we get desensitized to rewards, and we also actually get desensitized to punishments. And being your own punisher and rewarder can get a little bit tricky, as we do not necessarily stay accountable to ourselves. I really encourage you to conceptualize motivation as a byproduct of meeting your own psychological needs. And so once these 3 psychological needs are met, we actually have really good research on this, that individuals who have their psychological needs met then have higher states of motivation, and they have higher states of well-being and have an inherent desire to partake in the things that are interesting to them. An individual has their 3 psychological needs met. They are typically more productive, more motivated, and just have a higher state of well-being. And what's interesting to me is that this theory of motivation is not really popularized. What I often see is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which actually is a very old theory in psychology and not really utilized anymore. And the issue with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, besides the fact that Maslow never intended it to be a hierarchy, is that it doesn't have a lot of research to back up this theory. So I'm really excited to introduce a newer and more well-researched theory to you all, to help you really conceptualize what psychological needs are. And so this theory was invented by Ryan and DC, and I actually had the privilege of listening to a lecture by Richard Ryan yesterday on this topic. And the theory is called self-determination theory, and it has thousands of pieces of research behind it and a website in which you can have access to resources on the theory. And I will go ahead and link that website below if you want to check it out. So what are the basic psychological needs? Well, there are 3, like I mentioned before. They are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And so first of all, let's go with autonomy. Autonomy is the feeling you have self-efficacy in your life, that you have volition, that you can make the things happen that you want to happen. It's not the same as freedom, because freedom indicates a lack of responsibility, but it is having the ability to live your life in accordance with your values. And the second is competence. Competence is the feeling that you are skilled and effective in the things that you do, that you are able to engage in challenging tasks and overcome them, and the feeling that you can grow and learn in the tasks that you engage in. And the third is relatedness. Relatedness is the feeling that you are connected to other people and that you are part of a community. It is the feeling that other people care about you. And so what's interesting is that when these psychological needs are not met, it is very difficult to achieve motivation and to achieve optimal well-being for people. So if you're in a state of just feeling unmotivated, or you know someone that just feels unmotivated in their work or in their life, you might want to reference these psychological needs before you start implementing all the little productivity hacks and techniques that are so popular on the internet. Because honestly, the Pomodoro technique or whatever technique you're using is more of a band-aid and not necessarily getting to the root of the problem when there is a lack of motivation. And if you were to address the 3 psychological needs, you would be able to create a more effective and sustained state of motivation. So we know when the 3 psychological needs are not met, an individual typically has a low state of motivation. But what does this look like? So first of all, with autonomy, this is the most common need that I see not being met, especially in large organizations, because honestly, our workplaces are not really set up for autonomy. We have a lot of micromanagement, we have a lot of hierarchy, and the biggest recommendation I have when it comes to unmet autonomy need is that it's really important to realize that this unmet need, this feeling that you may have of being angry, sad, or just disengaged at work, is not necessarily your fault. It is actually a result of an organization and a system that is set up to not meet a basic psychological need. And so for a lot of people, it's hard for them to conceptualize that they actually have a need for autonomy and that this is just part of their humanness. Oftentimes they blame themselves for not being able to conform to an organizational structure, or to just not be tough enough to handle all of the little issues at work or whatever they might be experiencing. But when you have the sense that you don't have volition or self-efficacy at work, it actually does impede on your mental health and on your well-being, because this is a core psychological need, the need for autonomy. It is almost similar to an individual that doesn't drink enough water. Their body just doesn't function well, and it's not really something that we can argue with. It just is what it is. And so really conceptualizing your need of autonomy as a basic need, like drinking water, can actually be really freeing, because now instead of kind of beating yourself up for not being able to toughen up or suck it up or, not care as much, you realize that this is something that just is part of being human. And it is normal, and it is not in you that is the fault. It is within the organization, within the system. So let's move on to competence. Competence is another psychological need that I often see not being met. And this one is really common in individuals who have worked in a position for a long time. Maybe they've worked in the same organization for a long time. And that is when they start getting bored. The tasks are repetitive. They know how to do them. There is no challenge. And the thing with competence is that you actually need a little bit of a challenge to have that competence need met. You don't need a lot of challenge, but just a little bit. And you actually do need that kind of sense of growth and learning. And that's where it's really important to have feedback on your progress of attaining a skill or of completing a task or a project. And the thing that we know is that no feedback is actually just as detrimental as negative feedback. So it's really useful to have a manager, a friend, a colleague, a coach who supplies you with feedback on your progress and allows you to have that sense of self-efficacy that you are progressing towards your goal. And lastly, we have relatedness. And I know this need is tricky, especially in the last year and a half in which people have been distancing. But the thing about relatedness is that you actually don't need physical proximity to have this need met. And we know that we can actually have relatedness met over digital means. But the issue with our current technology usage is that it is not conducive to relatedness. And what I mean by this is that with the advent of social media, we all see all of our friends, family members, etc., colleagues, partaking in all kinds of social activities online, and we see their highlight reels. And what I've seen is that a lot of people think that others have kind of this like magical life that they live, and they're perfect and have so many friends and family members. But it's important to realize that most of us do have moments of loneliness, moments of feeling like we don't have enough support, and that is part of the human experience. And so the first step in meeting your need for relatedness is to realize that it's important not to compare your social network, your family, your community to another person's, especially to another person's Instagram or Facebook. And the second part is to really look for moments of relatedness in your life. What I see people often trying to do is that they look for the lack. They look for the times in which they don't have something, when they don't have a friend to call, or maybe a family member didn't reach out the way they wanted them to. And the issue with that is that by focusing on the times that you don't have something, you don't actually know how to create more instances of it. But if you do focus on the times that a friend did reach out, or you had a nice meal with your family, then you know how to create more of that and how to kind of sustain those moments of relatedness. So focus on the moments that you do feel connected, and understand that when you don't, it's normal, and that it's just your mind trying to kind of meet the psychological need and trying to motivate you to have this need met, which is a good thing. And so I hope that this theory and these tips were helpful to you. And I hope that now you're able to have a little bit more compassion for yourself when you have moments of hardship, or when you feel like your well-being is not at its best. And so I hope this video was helpful. I'll post links and resources in the description below, and I will see you all next week with another video.